Next we have Samurai, which are they a hybrid class? They're just a special subset class. They're based off of Cavalier. They lose out on the banner ability. Let me make sure I'm not doing crap here. Nope, they still have banner. That is a different banner though. Yeah, that's okay. They lose out on the give everybody teamwork feats bonus, and instead they get some other things. They have a mount, which you can trade away with various archetypes. They have various orders, similar to the Cavalier, but as opposed to being the whole teamwork, working together, rah rah rah, they're a lot more focused on you fighting as yourself. They can do mounted archery. That's one of the things they're good at. Katana use they have. They're exactly what you think when you think of more traditional samurai. Not necessarily with the Western interpretation of samurai, but in terms of the classical fight on a horse, usually with bows, they're capable with swords, samurai. That's what they are. Shaman. This is a hybrid class. We will come back to that one because we need to cover more of what they are hybrid of before we cover what they do. They are a hybrid of Witch and Oracle, which we haven't covered yet, and we need to cover that one first. So, Shifter. Shifter are a more recent class. Sorry, more. They were a later in the life cycle of Pathfinder 1 class. They're a martial focused class with access to shape-shifting abilities. Are they full bab? They are full bab. Their unique thing, as opposed to like a druid who gets access to full-on wild shape, I think the shifter might be able to get it. But normally they take aspects. So various aspects of various creatures. As they shift, they can shift for minutes per day. Usually you shift at the beginning of combat, it doesn't take all that long, and you get various bonuses. You're expected to fight in your shifted form most of the time. You shift, you get bonuses, you can swap them out, you can choose options, and then as you level up, you unlock more to use simultaneously. And then various archetypes allow you to focus your shapeshifting in different areas, fae, oozes, aberrations, all sorts of different things. I've not played them extensively. I've mostly played them as one-offs, so I'm not overly familiar with them. But if you're looking for someone with a little bit of transformation in their blood, with more natural attack in terms of focus, they could be a fun choice. Now, Skalds. Those are the Barbarians. Uh, Traditional in that. They're cool. I love Skalds. Admittedly, I don't really ever play one. The thing about Skalds, as opposed to giving, they have their I don't even know what it's called. Raging song. There are various raging songs they can provide. Similar to bards, they can provide a number of bonuses, marching and whatnot, and they have their bardic powers. Or they have bardic. Let's go ahead and click on the class so I'm not speaking crap. Yes, they have their inspired rage, raging song, and various others. They have versatile performance, similar as well, and they also have rage powers, which beyond just having normal rage powers, that they guarantee access to everybody performing their raging song. They also have access to, I guess everybody in the raging song has their rage powers, so that's what I was thinking of. So when they give these rage powers, the ones that are very limited in use in terms of barbarians can be very useful in terms of Skalds. The biggest problem with Skalds is they are very, very party specific. First off, their songs provide bonuses to strength and con. Everybody loves con, not everybody uses strength, and similar to a bard, when you are under a rage song, you may not do spell casting and whatnot, which can be very, very annoying. If you're unconscious, you automatically accept the song just to get those extra hit points, makes it a little bit easier to heal. Very good, very cool. However, with the right party setup, they can be an enjoyable experience. They're more limited in terms of their spell selection than bards. They're not quite as good at buffing, but they're a much better martial as a result of it. Or they're supposed to be a better martial as a result of that. I don't know if they're actually better, but they're cool. Rage powers, which they can. The one I'm thinking of is there's a rage power that gives you like a little mote of negative energy that floats around you and makes attacks whenever you're adjacent to enemies. That could be good. Not good for the Mummy's Mask, which we're going to be going through, but in an average game could be quite good. Because everybody gets their little mote of negative energy as opposed to just the one barbarian. But also they have an archetype that allows them to, instead of giving bonuses strength and con, they can instead provide weapon bonuses. So make your weapon like +1, make your weapon flaming and whatnot. That could be good if you have a more dex-based party, but you still want to play as Skald. But they're quite good. Now, Slayer, they are a rogue fighter, rogue ranger. They're considered another hybrid class. They are rogues in the fact that they are considered usually more sneaky, and they get access to Slayer talents, which can be somewhat similar to rogue talents. However, as opposed to the favored enemy selection, they have access to a thing called Stare? Studied target. Basically, they look at a target as some sort of action. It starts as off as a move, but eventually becomes a swift action. I think maybe eventually a free action. They look at their bad guy, as opposed to just having general racism, study how their anatomy, study how they work a little bit, and they get bonuses to hit damage and like tracking and whatnot. Very good in terms of they're much less dependent on sneak attack as compared to a rogue, and they're less enemy dependent as compared to a ranger, but can still do both of the kind of things they do, but less animal companion nature focused, of course, but are quite good in that regard. They also make some of the best assassins in the game because they have access to some assassination powers later down the line without having to access any prestige classes. Most importantly, because you're playing full Slayer, their assassination talents scale a lot better. Great class, great archetypes available to them, a lot of fun stuff. Sorcerer. We've talked a little bit about Sorcerer. They're a spontaneous caster that based off charisma. Oh, going back a little bit. Shifters, their strength usually, though they can be dex if they wanted to. So they are usually strength based with access to charisma just to do their spell casting. Slayers are generally strength or dex based. Notably, they do not get automatic dex to damage like an Unchained Rogue might. However, beyond that, they can be either way you want to slice. Sorcerers are fully charisma based. However, depending on how you build them, they may end up wanting other stats. But they're powered by what is called a bloodline. We talked about that when we were going over the player's guide. The bloodline is a feature that basically long ago, your ancestors had relations with a being that has magic in their blood, passed down through the bloodline. Lo and behold, now you have access to that magic, and without needing to study it, your blood just empowers you to be better. So maybe your ancestor had a relation with an angel, you get access to angelic magic, you're generally more good aligned, but I have a love-hate relationship with sorcerers. Sorcerers, within all of the fantasy settings, have always been one of my more favorite classes. I love having charisma. I love being able to use my charisma in social settings. I like spontaneous casters early on in my Pathfinder career, early on in my TTRPG career, because I found them simple and easy to play. But sorcerers in Pathfinder need help. They're half level behind in terms of their spell casting. One of the best archetypes for them makes them effectively an extra further level behind, so they're a full spell level behind. I suppose just half a spell level behind. They don't have, other than their bloodline, don't have a whole lot going for them. So we take a look in terms of their class features, it's just bloodline and that's it. So you're defined almost exclusively by that in your limited spell selection. However, your bloodline spells you get access to even later compared to when you first get access to that spell level. So it's an even further, if you're like planning to use a 4th level spell as your primary spell, you suffer because you don't get access to that later. So the running joke between my friends is, and that I've heard elsewhere, the best sorcerer build involves 19 levels of wizard. Because most of the features that you get as part of your bloodline work on any magic you cast. So you take a level in sorcerer for those juicy bonuses you want as part of your bloodline, and then you go a different class to actually take it full casting class to take advantage of those bloodline powers. Very sad, but if you overcome that, if you don't mind being a little more limited, and if you want to play a spellcaster but want to be something simpler, as it were, with maybe a little bit more lore, You play as an undead bloodline. Maybe you have a connection with undead. You're intrigued by it, but don't want to. You're kind of fighting this temptation of your blood. Same thing with all sorts of other things. They can be quite cool. Blood Ragers also have a bloodline, much more limited. They don't have a nearly as extensive list. But most creatures that have access to spell likes and are a wide variety of creatures, you're not just going to have a one-off creature that is spell likes, will give sorcerers a bloodline. Now, spiritualists. Spiritualists are special. Let me make sure I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking of the right class. Spiritualist is another companion-based build. As opposed to having an animal companion, they have a spirit. A spirit is a ghost, effectively, that has bonded to your soul in some way. Some may take objection to it. However, it is less. The gods that hit undead are a little bit more willing because they're not all evil. However, your party mileage may vary. They have this spirit. It can either be an ectoplasmic form or it's not an ectoplasmic form. They summon a spiritual, long-departed companion, maybe the ghost of an item they found. Some spirit possessed them. Regardless, a spiritualist has a companion that levels up as they do. Spiritualists get access to magic. They get access to their companion, which is based on a specific emotion, usually. Their spirit is connected in some way. Whatever reason is causing them to not move on to the afterlife gives them bonuses. Anger makes them a little bit better at fighting. Fear can make them better at causing fear and whatnot. I've not delved extensively into it, but if you're looking to play, again, a companion-based build and your party doesn't have objections to it in terms of their class, race, and whatnot, you have to come to some sort of agreement with that. They can be very interesting. They are very much, though, focused around their companion. Way more so than most any other build is. Well, we'll get to that in our next one. Sorcerers, I said, recruit them out. Spiritualists, I have no idea what they actually are. Usually, if we go down to spellcasting, spells, they psychic spells, they're wisdom based. Okay. So they're a wisdom based caster, however, usually they are able to perform some martial discipline to be able to support their phantom. So they will have enough spellcasting to be capable of casting spells. Beyond that, they will be just what they are. Now then, moving on to Summoner, an Unchained Summoner. So broadly, Summoners are once again a companion-defined build. However, as opposed to having it naturally or it being some sort of spirit, goodness, that was a voice crack. It being some sort of spirit, a Summoner summons something from other planes. That can be, I mean, any plane that it could possibly be, and you can be any sort of creature that it could possibly be. They get access to a base form that they select as they first come into Summoner, and as they continue to level up, they'll get evolution points, which they can spend on their creature to evolve their Eidolon, is what it is called, to develop it. They're also a charisma-based spellcaster that goes up to 6 level spells, mostly with buff spells on their list, though with a little bit of utility. However, if their Eidolon is not out, because you have to summon it as part of a ritual, and it can disappear if you fall unconscious or are sleeping, they have access to summoning magic. The summon monster skill is they can use a limited number of times per day. So, the quick difference between Summoner and Unchained Summoner is Summoner is ridiculously broken and shouldn't have been shipped in the state that it was in. You may say, why? Why is that? 2 reasons. Similar to before. First off, the Eidolon that they come with is ridiculously strong compared to where it should be as a companion-based thing. Summoners are already a spellcaster, and they get access to a great variety of buff spells. But if you build your companion properly, you don't even have to build them properly. If you build them remotely decently, they're as good, if not better in terms of damage, than your frontline martial is, assuming they are assuming they're decently knowledgeable and not just kind of flubbing the job there. So you can be a better fighter than the fighter, and also they get access to spellcasting way earlier than most other classes. I'm talking most spells on their, or at least half their spell list is spells lower level than they should be. Now, Bard, I give a little bit of leeway. It's only a small spattering of spells, usually in the enchantment or minor buffing spells. However, Summoner gets a lot beyond just basic buffing spells. They get access to a lot of stuff early. The point where they're also a better spell or as good a spellcaster as a wizard is in terms with their limited list. They're not an offensive spellcaster necessarily. They can control the battlefield, do a little bit of enchantment and a ton of buffing, but they don't necessarily do damage numbers like wizard might. But not necessarily the best way to do things in terms of magical casting. They're as good a spellcaster as your full caster, and they're a better fighter than your fighter, all rolled into one class. Plus, with a spattering of overpowered archetypes on top of that, ooh baby, is it much? So, Unchained Summoner. They fixed the issue with the spell selection. They put spells mostly back to where they went. I think they might get access to a couple of spells early, but it is way more balanced now. And their Eidolons are way more limited in terms of what they can do. Instead of just having a base form based on your basically number of legs and arms, it is based on what plane you're drawing your Eidolon from. So he could be like an angel sort of being, a devil, a demon, maybe just a serpentine sort of form, which very much limits, excuse me, the selection you're able to make in terms of your evolutions, which makes it a lot less overpowered. So instead of being better than a fighter, he is maybe a step back from in terms of a player character, even fully buffed, but still much better than an animal companion. So it's a much more balanced class. Also, a number of the archetypes that are overpowered just don't exist as an Unchained Summoner, and for good reason. I'm looking at you, Synthesis Summoner. Almost done. Only 6 more to go. Okay, Swashbuckler. Swashbucklers are quite easy. They're considered a hybrid class of both a fighter and gunslinger. Fighter in terms of they fight with martial weapons, and a gunslinger in terms of their deed. They are also defined by almost exclusively a single class feature, parry riposte. Oh, if it wasn't clear, summoners were exclusively Prisma focused because they don't need any other stat that exists, because all of their physical stats are based on their Eidolon, so la-di-da. But with Unchained, you can certainly build yourself as a more combat focused and support your summon from the front line. Be aware, if you go down, bad things happen. Oh yeah, and also summoners. Another reason they're powerful is because they're also a better summoner in terms of summoning enemies than a wizard if they want to be. They get way more options per day than them. Just powerful stuff. Swashbuckler, again, fighter. They get the deeds from Gunslinger. They get the bonus feats and the martial prowess from fighter. Defined by parry riposte. They get a number of panache points based on their charisma. It's like 3 plus charisma mod plus a spattering of other minor things. So, parry riposte is a feature that when an enemy makes an attack roll against you, as an attack by spending a panache point and an attack of opportunity, you may attempt to parry that. It's an opposed attack roll. If they win, their attack goes through as normal using that basic attack. However, if your attack roll is higher, based with some modifiers based on size and other features, then you parry their attack, and then if you spend your immediate action, so your swift action, we'll get into that as we start playing the game, you make an attack roll back against the creature. That's only once per round that you can riposte, because you only get one immediate per round. What you need to take into consideration. So, it's a really good character in terms of dodging. You can mitigate attacks. You can, if they got like a poison stinger plus a couple of claws, you can dodge the poison stinger. It can be a lot of fun. The problem is, a lot of the features are front-loaded. You get parry riposte and a couple of the other things at first level. You get panache points back by either downing an enemy of, I think, sufficient CR. It might be sufficient CR, regardless, or critting an enemy. so it's fairly easy to get them back. So you can pretty well charge your panache up and down as you go. They're required to use light one-handed finessable weapons, so they're generally a dex-based class, and they get dex to damage as a part of one of their feats. Eventually, get access to precision damage uh, based on their class level on every attack roll. So they can do some pretty good damage, even though they're only making one attack, or they're only using one weapon per round. They usually riposte every round or so against more important enemies. So I've played a Swashbuckler extensively. I had a ton of fun with it because it wasn't just I attack every round. It gave you some options in terms of their deeds. But still, it was basically a full attack. But they got good numbers even with just a full attack. They also like making crits. They automatically at 5th level get critical focus, or their expanded crit range with their weapons. Usually a high crit range weapon, so they're quite good with that. A good class and a fun class if you're looking for something beyond just base fighter. They're usually dex-based with charisma to back them up. Okay, next on to Vigilante. Vigilante is it considered a hybrid class? It is not. Vigilante, I mean, from the name you expect to be a Vigilante. They have two identities. They have their normal identity and a disguised identity. You're like you're Batman. You have a disguise you can put on. Whenever you're disguising specifically in that identity, you get an additional plus 20 to your disguise check, which means on average, no mere mortal will be able to see through your disguise, which is pretty awesome. But there are two different paths you can build them down. You can either build them down the martially focused or the sneaky focused one. Sneaky focused one gets access to a more limited form of sneak attack damage. The martial focused one gets access to full bab, and they both have separate Slayer talent, or not Slayer, Vigilante talents they can pick. There's the social talents, which gives you bonuses on interacting with people, interacting with societies, and kind of doing the social part of things. And then there's the more combat focused art, which gives you bonuses on dealing with the more combat focused side of things. The main advantage of Vigilante is they can be similar in terms of capabilities of a fighter. They are considered a fighter. I think they might be considered a fighter. Regardless, they can get a bunch of bonus combat feats if they want. They have a large number of skills at their disposal. They're generally a strength or dex focused character, usually dex focused because people a lot of times build vigilantes as dex based characters, but also they get access or they need charisma because a lot of their features are based on charisma. Next up, War Priests. These are a fighter cleric hybrid class. They don't get access. They're similar to Inquisitors in that they only get up to 6th-level spellcasting. However, they are they're a prepared spellcaster. Yes, access to a prepared spellcaster, much more martially focused as a cleric. If you're looking to play a cleric as a warrior, War Priest is probably the safe bet for you. Their main feature is their blessings. They don't get access to full domains, they get access to blessings. List is pretty much the same. Their biggest feature is as part of casting a spell, they can cast the spell on themselves as a swift action, so really quickly while still doing everything else, attacking and moving and all that. As a swift action, if it's a self-only buff spell, a number of times per day equal to their fervor points or whatever their specific power pool is called. Blessings, fervor, yeah, they're fervor dice. So they're really good at self-buffing. There's a spell called Divine Favor, which gives bonus to hit and damage. Very good on them. They cast its first level, they get bonus to hit and damage. Eventually, they give themselves defensive buffs. I mean, you really can't go wrong. They eventually get access to other things that make their weapons stronger. So their sacred weapon, which is their god's favored weapon. If your god's favorite weapon is like a dagger, eventually you can make it so your dagger, instead of doing a D4 damage, it's like a D12, 2D6 if you get high enough level. They eventually can get enchantments to their weapon so that it gives additional bonus damage, maybe bonus stats, maybe bonuses here and there based on their alignment. Again, if you're looking to play a cleric but want to hit things in melee, War Priest is a safe bet. Now, Witch, and then I'll move on back over to Shaman. Witch is a full caster based on War Priest, sorry. They're usually strength or dex focused based on what around, enough wisdom to cast their spells, maybe a little bit higher, because they still can do a little bit of offensive casting if they want, but keep in mind you generally want to be hitting things with your weapon as a War Priest, so your strength or dex is important. Now, Witch. They have they're on light, and they're kind of a They're a wizard with a little bit of warlock inspiration. And they have a patron, a mysterious patron. It doesn't have to be anybody defined. It is considered a more. I mean, there's a huge list of various patrons. Is there? I mean, agility, ancestors, animals, aurora, decadence, deception. These are not necessarily hardwired in terms of you have to have a specific person in mind when you're choosing a patron, but an idea, kind of a theme around. Usually these give you some sort of power, they give you an access to a spattering of spells. The disadvantage, of course, similar to sorcerers, it is a delayed spell. So your main spell that you're likely going to be casting is delayed by half a level. Put you on par with sorcerers, not the big a deal. They're also a full caster with their own unique spell list, which is very similar to a wizard spell list. However, it includes more debuffing spells and a little spattering of healing spells as well. The most important things to keep in mind, they are a prepared spellcaster, but as opposed to having a spellbook like a wizard, their spellbook is their familiar. If the familiar goes kaput, or gets stolen, or kidnapped, or dies, or something, or you throw it out in danger, or you use it to sneak around, and it dies, there goes your spellcasting capabilities until you get a new one. Very rough, very hard. Don't kill off your familiars, people. Hide them in your. Get a really small one and hide it in your coat jacket, or get a familiar pouch. They're cheap, they're easy. You hide your familiars inside of them. Number two, they have access to these things called hexes. Hexes are a limited time per day, based on a variety of factor. Uh, just thing they can do. Some of the common ones are slumber. Once per 24 hours per enemy creature, you look at an enemy creature within 30 feet and say, make a will save or fall asleep for a number of rounds equal to my witch level, I think. DC is based on your intelligence. These are an intelligence-based class. So, like, I think some of their features may end up using. Most of it's all int-based, but you may end up using a spattering of charisma here or there, or wisdom based on the specific mystery you end up, or patron you end up selecting. But slumber, you make people fall asleep. Misfortune, you look at someone, make a will save, or for a round, you roll twice, take lower. Evil eye, look at someone, or to take penalties on certain things of your choice. Uh, Another one, healing hex, once per day per ally, or once per day per creature. You can give them a over time increasing bonus to health. Flight hex gives you access to flight, lower level flight, and then eventually permanent flight for a period of time per day. It is a full caster that is based around using it. The biggest problem with witches is there's some hexes which are just better than others. Slumber, misfortune, evil eye being the common. Oh, and cackle, which makes your hexes last longer, being the most common ones. So there's also some gimmicky stuff you can do it where you just never stop cackling. Then you never have to worry about your one round duration things going away. It could be a bit much, but a very very fun full caster to play if you want to play with something a little bit different, or if you want to play a wizard with a little bit more staying power. Because your hexes are generally associated per person, if you can slumber this person in this room, slumber this person in the next room, slumber this person in the next room, so on and so forth, assuming they're not immune to it. Undead, like we're going to be encountering in the Mummy's Mask, generally immune to the slumber. So you want to avoid that. Now, shifting back over to Shaman. Shamans are, I believe, what is it? Oracle Witch hybrid class. They are I believe they are a wisdom-based caster. They are a wisdom-based caster, yes. They get access to Hex. Most of them using their wisdom. Some are not. You'll have to ask your GM for permission if they don't. They get access to hexes, a much more limited selection, I believe. Not the full list, though I could be mistaken in that regard. However, they have a much more special bond with their familiar. They pick a mystery somewhat similar into the way that the Oracle does, and bonds their familiar to it. For example, the Earth familiar that is an option gives their familiar like gemstones set in their body, giving them some DR and other bonuses. I played a I don't know if I'm that's not true. I didn't really play a Shaman before. I had a level in Shaman before because of the cool bonuses provide. But otherwise, they're a full caster with wisdom based. They have their own special spell list. Again, a lot more healing and debilitating focused as compared to a true oracle, but another cool thing. Also, Wandering Spirit and Wandering Hex allows you some of the times to change out your certain spell selections. You can perform a temporary bond with a spirit in place of another one you've already selected with your spirit class feature. So it gives you some utility and options. Again, utility, not the greatest, can be cool, but a really fun class nonetheless. And finally, El Clasico Wizard. So, what I will say about Wizard, they are the quintessential selection in terms of spellcaster. They're int based, high int really being the only thing that matters. A dexterity score is nice if you're planning to roll decent on initiative based on dex, or make some ranged touch attacks on a once in a blue moon. But your wizard is much more dependent on your spell selection than anything else. You also get a familiar, use minor bonuses, and then eventually you can evolve it to do cool things. Most of the time, most people just pick the initiative granting familiar because they're lame, and I'm one of those people. Why sometimes I ban initiative boosting familiars. Um, you're much more defined by your spell list or your school that you've chosen to specialize in. Of course, there are other things, but if you take a look at the wizard's specials, there's not a whole lot here. They get bonus feats, which can either be a crafting feat or a crafting feat or a limited selection. Arcane Bond, this is either your familiar or you bond with a special item that allows you to recast a spell once per day, which is cool enough. I mean, if you really don't want to deal with a familiar or you just want to cast more spells, that's fine. Also, if your GM has banned uh, item crafting, usually they'll allow you to craft with your special bonded item. That can be a way to get early access to something if you're wanting to deal with that. Yeah, bonus feats, whatnot. The various wizard, there's a ton of different schools that do get arcane discoveries, though these are really not all that great. They're much more defined by their school. I got the basics: abjuration, conjuration, divination, enchantment. Let's go ahead and cover the schools real fast. Abjuration, these are your defensive spells, giving yourself bonuses. Defense, these are your again, banishment, counter spells, exactly kind of what you'd expect. Getting rid of magic, getting rid of creatures that shouldn't exist here, protecting yourself from harmful magic, that sort of thing. Conjuration, these are summoning spells. Again, creation, extra dimensional, teleportation. So going to other dimensions, making little pocket dimensions, going from place to place, summoning or creating things. Usually spells of the conjuration school are permanent once created. So if you acid splash, that is a real set of acid as compared to like a frostbolt, which is just a minor a bit of chill. Conjuration being a pretty powerful class because it also involves summoning creatures and creating extra divination, foresight, prophecy, scrying, exactly what you expect. Finding things out about other creatures, getting minor bonuses to yourself, quite decent. Enchantment, controller, manipulator, changing other people's emotions, whether for good or for ill, falls under enchantment. A lot of buff spells fall under enchantment, like heroism. You give yourself bonuses as an enchantment spell. Evocation, exactly what you expect. You are evoking some sort of elemental thing. Admixture, generation. These are generally your offensive spell. Well, not generally your only offensive spells, but these are your damage-based offensive spells. Throwing a fireball, throwing a lightning bolt, so on and so forth. Those are generally under the category of an evocation. You're looking at elemental damages. Illusion. Illusion is your school of deception, phantasm, shadow, making people see things that aren't there. Your mileage may vary. Silent image can be very powerful, but if your GM doesn't play ball or they have different rules based on how illusions interact, it can be very difficult to use. However, this also includes stuff like invisibility, mirror image, a lot of other defensive spells. Also, shadow spells. Shadow spells allow you to pair something like a shadow evocation, which allows you to use any evocation spell of a lower spell level. So if it's a 4th level shadow evocation, any 3rd or lower level spell evocation spell, you can just pop out. However, they're entitled to a will save, first to disbelieve the illusion, like any illusion spell, and if they're successful, it's only partially, or it's only very slightly as effective. But still, a good school. Necromancy is both life and undeath, infusing things with life and taking life away and infusing unlife into things. a lot of debuffing spells, a lot of things based around hit points, whether taking those away or granting temporary hit points found, and of course your classic animating the dead and doing that sort of thing. Transmutation is enchantment and shape change. Changing your shape from one form to another via the various form spells, beast shape, monstrous physique, undead anatomy, and so on and so forth. Those are all transmutation spells. Also enchantment spells that give you like get yourself stronger, give yourself gills, give yourself like little climbing hands. Those sort of things follow under transmutation. And of course, there's universal. Those are no specific school, such that everybody kind of has access to them. There's also, if you don't want to do any of these schools, the advantage of choosing one is every day you get access to a special spell slot in addition to your base ones that must be spent on that school. Penalty is you must pick 2 schools, outside of universals, of course, that are your opposed schools, which means if you want to prepare them, it takes 2 slots instead of 1. Generally, you pick your school you focus on, you're very good at that, you'll take spell codes and feats around that. But your opposed school, you generally won't focus on, or you only take them in case of emergency. There's also stuff like elemental schools. You can pick an element. They also have options for them. Various archetypes. There's Sin Magic. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I like Sin Magic a lot. It's very cool, both good and ill in that regard. I guess Sin and Virtue. They're 2 sides of the coin. Regardless, Wizard, I mean, it's quintessential. They're defined by their spell list and the school of magic they have selected. So, that was the primer on every class in the game. That took like an hour. There's a lot of classes. Sorry it took so long. But a quick overview of prestige classes. As I said before, all of the classes, these are flavorful. The problem with them is not a lot of them are good. A lot of the more martial focused ones have very, very specific requirements to getting in, and a lot of feats may be pretty not great. Skill selection, not the end of the world, but the feat selection can be a little bit detrimental for full effectiveness. Again, we don't need to min-max. None of the adventure paths require min-maxing. Usually you can get away with just being pretty good. Being actively bad can be a little bit harmful, but if you follow, or if you look at some of the guides, you can avoid the active traps and whatnot. Another piece of advice I could give, Pathfinder Society, Pathfinder Organized Play, is the overarching, was and is, for Pathfinder 2 and some other systems, for organized play. So you go together, and you play these characters. It can be anywhere within the country or anywhere within the world. The pre-generated content, you get money, you get rewards, you level up as appropriate. But there's this little badge here, organized play. If it says PFS legal, a lot of that means, for one reason or another, whether for balance or whatnot, these have been deemed suitable for play in organized play. If they are not labeled that way, it is usually for one of 2 reasons. Either it is horrifically unbalanced, and either there is an FAQ explaining why, or they're just straight up banned because there's too much. For example, the normal summoner, though they originally were grandfathered in, or it's based on evil stuff. Pathfinder Society doesn't allow you to play evil characters, so a lot of the evil stuff, or stuff based around crafting, I guess is a third thing, will not be allowed. So, as a general rule of thumb for introductory DMs, if you're looking at Archives of Nethys, the PFS legal thing is a great indicator of what you might want to allow and not allow. Some of this type that says red, it gives you a little bit more of what the specific requirements are. Maybe it trades out something that is illegal for organized play for something that is legal for organized play. Maybe there are specific requirements you have to go through. For example, the base wizard class has Scribe Scroll for free. PFS doesn't allow the crafting feats, so it says, hey, trade it out for a spell focus or of your choice or a spattering of other things. A lot of those options are a good way to balance your games. So keep an eye out on that. It can give you a decent idea. But getting back to prestige classes, they have a lot of specific requirements, or if you're playing a more magic-focused prestige class, they lose spell levels. But if you're playing a wizard, not the end of the world if you lose a spell level here. However, if you plan to go in with like a sorcerer or oracle, then you're really starting to fall behind the curve. There are ways to get around that. There's some feats, There's some other organization-y nonsense to do. Really not really designed for that, but if you find one you like, don't let here's some advice of people. Look up the guide, spend a little bit of time looking into it, make sure you're actually willing to do it. But don't let someone stop you by playing a prestige class just because they say they're not good. You don't have to be good in Pathfinder, assuming everybody around the table has a rough idea of what the power level you're going to be. Don't want to be too strong, make everybody feel less powerful, unless you really got a break class in case of emergency of a TPK. I've had that sort of thing happen where I've had characters that are really their niche is supporting the party, doing this sort of thing, but they always have that break glass. I can do this sort of thing once a day, once in a whatever, just in case things go horribly, horribly awry. So make yourself balanced with the rest of the party, and you don't want to be too weak either. That is also one of the reasons why I do not like rolling for stats without specific restrictions. I'd very much prefer point buy. That's how I've been playing Pathfinder basically the entire time. With a few exceptions, there have been some pre-made content that prefers to roll stats, which has been helpful. However, I'm of the opinion, if players want to roll their stats, okay. You're generally going to get a somewhat weaker character, maybe more balanced character, but a weaker character. If I'm going to roll stats, I like to have a point buy equivalent set up next to me. I will roll stats until I get an array of maybe 10 to 20 different arrays. At which point I will say, okay, roll your d20, roll your d12, or however many I've set up, you may choose these. The reason I have chosen those 20 is because they're somewhat similar in terms of their point buy equivalent. So some may have high stats and low stats, some may have slightly higher elevated stats across the board, but I'll generally give like a plus or minus 5 point buy. So if the average is like a 25, there might be some people with a 28, there might be some people with like a 22. Usually the point buy is slightly higher than the point buy equivalent in terms of Pathfinder. Usually organized play and most scenarios expect a 20 point buy. I will allow slightly higher than that in terms of my rolled point buy because it allows for a bunch of 14s as opposed to like in a 16 as opposed to a bunch of 12s being the average. But make sure your group, you know roughly the power of your group so you don't feel outdone or you outdo everybody else. That is, I think that's the most important. You got to find a good play group. I had one throughout the years. People have gone, people have left, but the group I've got now, we're all experienced. Well, we're pretty much all experienced. Some people have joined and gone, but as they continue to play, they're learning. They know what they're doing. They're branching out, playing different types of characters as games has gone on. But it is an enjoyable experience nonetheless. Play a prestige class if you like. Make sure it fits in the setting. Make sure it fits with your party. And make sure you fit with the prerequisites. And you speak with your DM ahead of time to allow the RP of it. And make sure they're on the same page as to this is what you're going to do. Because some of them require you having met certain conditions RP-wise before joining. Either interacting with people or doing specific checkboxes. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to follow links down below if you want to see some of my content, and I will see you all next time.